a business owner, an advocate for small businesses, and an ally to the LGBT community. And so, Jessica.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with all of you today. And thank you all for just taking the time out to come in and spend this time with us on such an important conversation and such a challenging time. I am a business owner. I work in the area of safety and security. And so my passion is really thinking and grounding and how do we create spaces for everyone based in security and love. I'm a daughter. I am a sister. I'm actually a twin sister. And she's in law enforcement. So my thoughts and much of the time is also with her. And I'm very focused right now on how do we really focus on healing and sharing and connecting. So I'm glad you're all here today. So thank you.
Jessica, where are you located today? Where on the planet are you sitting right now?
I am in Forest Hills in Queens.
Okay, so is that Lenape area as well, Eduardo? Yeah, he's shaking his head. That's where I am too. I learned that in fourth grade for my daughter's fourth grade class. That's exactly where I am. So I think this is a great way to start our conversation. I too am very thankful for everybody who's come out today to listen and to learn. And I'm truly here to listen and to learn as well. And as host, I'm hoping that I'm putting forward the questions that people are thinking of. So guys, please go ahead and type in your questions. We have folks that are watching to make sure I'm on my toes, and we'll try to get them answered today. And then maybe there's a part two, because I believe that Eduardo and the Fearless Force team intend to continue this conversation. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge what Eduardo has done. I am an ally to the LGBT community through my publication, Business Equality Pride, or BEQ magazine, Business Equality Magazine. And for him today to decide and understand that in his privilege to set aside so that two women identifying, Black identifying, African American identifying women could have a conversation in a safe space. That's what we're creating here, is a safe space. And I'll go even a little further and make this even sacred, to have a conversation that is intended to heal and make things better. We don't intend to traumatize anyone or even cause any turbulence, but if something comes up for you, there are resources. And I think that's where we should begin. Jessica, telling us a little bit about what brings us here today, and why you found a need to bring resources together and how you're sharing them.
Yeah, so I do have a collection of resources that I'm sharing with people, and it really came about organically. A lot of these I have already just within the work that I do, really focusing on how do we focus on creating safe spaces for women and people of color in the world. But as this current situation continued to unfold, and I was having conversations with people, I really wanted to ensure that not only did people feel comfortable with where they could support financially, so whether it was bail funds or supporting other funds that were available, like for example in Minneapolis, if people wanted to engage in conversation and around the topic of racial justice and white privilege, where they can find resources to do that. If people were engaging in confrontational conversations, ways that they can also best engage in those conversations. And also, so many people want to get involved, but they also may not know exactly how or where. And so just providing resources to engage in conversation, so being on webinars like this, knowing exactly what you can do and how you can advocate to your local representative or to another public official, particularly in an election year. And so that was really the thought behind it, and continue to gather resources and information that people could utilize. And it just really continued to balloon into a plethora of information that also involves how to engage your children. What are documentaries we could be watching, books that people should be watching. And I think what continues to be part on my mind and part of my consciousness right now is that at the end of the day, I think people are seeking a lot of these questions because they know that this is important, but they don't know all of the information. And I think part of that is because from anyone that's on this call that has grown up in America, they didn't learn a lot of this in school. I mean, American history wasn't, Black history wasn't part of American history in school and a lot of our classes. And I was sharing earlier that I remember in the 7th grade, our history class, the topic or the conversation on slavery literally was 2 paragraphs in our high school, in our textbook. And so I think that there's so much people want to have a better understanding and context of. And so these resources allow for that to happen and for that to take place.
So thank you for that. So let's get into this a bit. Your personal experience coupled with your professional experience, what is it that you're thinking and feeling right now, personally and professionally? So you as an individual showing up as you are and as a business owner with all that's happening, and especially in terms of racial justice and equity.
Yeah, as a business owner, I'm like everyone else. I'm impacted by what's going on with the pandemic. But I have to be honest, with everything that's been going on with the recent deaths and then up to the killing of George Floyd, it really has been about what can we do to raise awareness? What can we do to raise our voice? To me, it's very clear that this is a time that there is a need for a response to the calling that is taking place. And so I've been in touch and been in talking to a number of people within my network, and we have all been thinking and discussing different ways to respond. And so for me, that's part of where I am right now. The second area I would say is with my family. At the end of the day, we're all impacted. And so I want to know how everyone is doing. I have a brother who has been deeply impacted by, right now, him and his fiance, by white silence, which is something that is really painful to see. He and his fiance have friends that are not responding the way that they'd hope, and just their own personal support, but also their comments have been very hurtful. And so I think for a lot of people, there's a reality of who your friends are right now, and it really hurts. The other place, number 3, and where I am right now is, as I mentioned, I have a twin sister, and she's in law enforcement. And so we can be really, really upset with law enforcement. We can say that they're all bad. We can say that they all need to be retrained, and we need to completely, in some cases, remove a lot of funds from law enforcement, and some of that may be true. But what is also true is that there are really, really amazing officers out there. There are really, really amazing federal law enforcement officers, and showing that support and also to be able to share her experience is something that I think has been really important because she definitely represents someone who is living her mission, living her purpose, and allowing for people to simultaneously give their voice, but also do it in a safe way where with what she's doing. And so for me, I would say that a lot of my time is there. And then the other thing that I would add is, for me, this isn't just, a response about what we need to do to change really on this physical level, meaning the earth that we're on. To me, this is also spiritual. This kind of what has been going on this year, if you look at the wildfires, if you look at the pandemic, and then that uprising, which is what it's now being called, to me, this really indicates much larger conversation and also a much larger picture of what is going on in this world right now. And I think that that's something that can't be ignored. And I think this is the case. I would say it doesn't matter what your background is and how you look at your own personal views on spirituality or religion. What I do know is that no matter what, for all of us, this is a calling. This is a calling for all of us to live from a higher space, live from a space of love, and to be able to talk and to move from that space.
That's such a great point. Being at cause for something as opposed to being at the effect. Because right now, a lot of people are feeling a lot of overwhelm, a lot of anxiety. Children are feeling anxiety. So thank you. And I think just to get a point of clarification, the resources that you're talking about are going to be shared with the audience or someplace centrally. Yes, Eduardo is saying yes.
That's right.
So
yes,
you guys,
Eduardo packaging those up, and he will send them out as a kind of like a mini toolkit or a list of all of the different resources that you can utilize. And again, what they include are different organizations that you should connect with. For example, Show Up for Racial Justice is one. Obviously, Black Lives Matter. There are different articles that are there that that are very helpful to read. There are lists of books that are there that you should be reading. And again, I don't want to say should to anyone, but again, if you've grown up in America, particularly just K through 12, there has not been a full showing of American history, which includes Black history and Native American history. And so these books offer more of that perspective for your knowledge. There are also information on where you can donate, which is really important. This is an election year. So what should we all be doing in an election year? Really important information, as well as where you can donate to be able to support people who need bailouts right now. I'm so grateful for people. Everyone is kind of supporting collectively from where they are. So how we can support each other in this larger community is really important.
And that brings me to our opportunity to just jump right in. So we've taken care of all those logistics. So you have a background, and your company is in cybersecurity, creating truly safe spaces virtually, but you're in confidence building business, I'd say. Am I right about that?
Yes, and I would say confidence building, keeping people safe, keeping systems and data safe for sure. But it all comes down to people. Always people first.
So one of the things that's coming up, and this happened for me, I think, given the confluence of events, everything that's going on, COVID-19, just the fear, the anxiety, and then to have the situation in Central Park, right? What they're calling Central Park Karen, as a Black woman, just facing that alone, and the impact of technology. To me, it all of a sudden was like, you want to always have a phone available so you can record that maybe you're only link out to the rest of the world, that maybe you're only saving grace. And you have a technology background and experience. What did you think in terms of technology, how it's changed our awareness, even to be able to look at history and what people are writing all over the world? There's a plethora, there's so much information. How is technology impacting where we are right now?
Yeah, so two things arise for me very immediately. The first thing is cell phones. There's no doubt that the reason why we've been able to even have an awareness of what's been going on, whether it was what's been going on this year or what has been going on the past few years, particularly 2016, 2017, and 2015, is because of cell phones. Law enforcement officers are being filmed. Individuals, citizens are being filmed. And if they're showing up in a way that is showing hatred or that is showing racism, there's an opportunity for that to be aired and for it to be filmed. I think, for the Fidel Castro, for that killing, for that death to be shown on Facebook Live, I think that really set the tone, and it was amazing when that happened. And technology is basically an accountability tool. That is what this has turned into. And when people are in public and they see something that they think is wrong, a lot of times the phone comes out. And so I think it's an important way to, yes, hold people accountable, but it also speaks to why there has been so much conversation and really publicly around racial justice and what needs to be done to move forward, and also racial healing. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of my white friends that I've spoken to, there's been an awareness of it, but I think for them to now see it, when you actually see something happen on film, it just brings you to a certain level of consciousness where you have a deeper understanding of it. And so I think that it's a powerful time. The second thing I would say is that part of technology is also what's been going on now around the disinformation or fake information. And I think what has been great is that though we have more and a lot of disinformation or fake information, what technology does allow people to do is to quickly get access to the right information. So for a lot of people that are saying, I don't know a lot of what's going on, or I don't know if this historical timeline is correct, you can actually, all you have to do is go to one website, you could actually start to actually find that out. And I think that that's really important, and that people are really focusing on looking at the right information, focusing on critical thinking, asking the right questions about not just the information that they're reading, but how they engage. And I think that people challenging themselves in this way is one of also the great things about technology. They don't have to worry about finding a book on it the way, you know, people had to do 20 years ago. You can just pull out your phone and you can start to research something on your own.
Yeah,
Jessica,
that's,
Robin,
oh, go ahead.
sorry to
Sure.
interrupt.
Mhm.
You both had activated me to lead with the chat. So
Yeah.
my
Yes,
question
yes,
is with
Yeah.
permission from Robin and Jessica. I just wanted to
yes.
clarify. I just wanted to acknowledge that there are some questions that are coming into the chat that I will pose to the two of you. One of them is to Jessica's point about white silence. What is a good way for white people to reach out to their Black coworkers in a way that is sensitive and not offensive?
Yeah, so that's okay. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking. So what I would say is that the most important thing is acknowledgement of what's going on. I think that I'm going to say the first thing, to your question, that I'm going to say something in response to that as being an African American woman and on that side. Be open and honest. You can just say, if you don't exactly know what to say, you can actually say that. But to acknowledge that you that you are that you aren't happy with what's going on, and how you feel about it, I think is important. To be able to ask someone to just have a conversation about it, or to talk about it. Number two is what I would also say. Number three, ask them how they're being impacted. Ask them how this is impacting them now. What are they feeling? Because the truth is, your Black coworkers, they're not okay. It's like we just saw a death on television. How many people are used to even seeing a death in real life? We just saw someone basically deliberately murdered. He was deliberately murdered, and he had no qualms about it, and knowing he was filmed. You know, to just be able to go back to work, knowing that that person did it so carelessly, and to be able to just go back into work and say, okay, let's do that presentation. That isn't always realistic. And so to acknowledge that, and to ask people to have conversations and create the space for it. If you have team meetings, acknowledge what's going on at the beginning of the meeting. Acknowledge what's going on in the country and allow space for conversation to take place. I think that that's extremely important to happen, and for people to feel comfortable doing. And the last thing I would say is, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, acknowledge that too. Just open up the meeting, or open up a conversation and say, I don't know what the right thing to say is, but I know what I'm feeling. I would love to know what you're feeling, just talk with you about it. So I hope that that's helpful. The other thing that I would say on the other side of that is, it is important for me, I know that I'll just speak from my personal experience as a woman of color, is to also have compassion for people around me. I can be frustrated and go, I thought this person had my back, and they're not posting anything, and they're being silent. But what if I actually waited for them to engage me, or waited for them to post something instead of being upset about it? Or when they do engage me, bring up the topic, because if we are friends, then that's something that I should also feel comfortable doing. And so I also just want to say that, what I've learned in my experience is to be compassionate too, and to understand that everyone's in a different space now. Everyone, particularly with the pandemic, there's so much going on, everyone's in a different space. So there have been times where I've been upset around the white silence, but I've also known that I too have to make sure that I'm taking a step back in order to make sure that I am looking at the situation the right way too.
I think that was really a helpful question. As an ally to the LGBT community, I'm often trying to tiptoe sometimes, trying to be careful, so I can personally understand where a person who's not Black or not a person of color, how it can be awkward to try to show someone that you're there for them. But there's no jail for malice, right? I mean, no one's going to jail you because you're malicious if your intent is to really help. So, Jessica, what you shared is really helpful. And when we think about just stepping back to the technology part of it, as a tool for accountability, that's incredibly powerful. It's causing accountability, and then challenging the audience here, you folks that are here with us today, to actually be critical thinkers, to actually challenge what you think you already know. I tell my daughter that all the time. How do you know? Are you sure you know? and look for other resources, because information is ubiquitous, and we have the ability to just challenge ourselves and to look for different sides of the argument. So that's very, very powerful information that years ago we wouldn't have had that. Like you said, in 7th grade, when you were in 7th grade, Black history was two paragraphs.
Right.
And it's not that case now.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I love that you brought up the children. I think now is such a wonderful time for parents to be educating children. It's a wonderful time to engage them in conversation. I've heard from friends that some children just, they don't understand the concept of what's going on. They don't understand racism. They're still too young for that. That's which is great. It's, that's the beautiful innocence of children. And so there still needs, though, to be an education. So how can they continue to learn properly around the history of this country, how to engage? And if they were to be in a situation where someone is saying racist remarks, or there's some sort of conflict that happens to be created, how do they respond? And giving them those tools is something that I think is extremely helpful to do. And I know I don't have children, so I'm saying this and acknowledging that I'm not a parent, but I do think that right now, where a lot of parents are homeschooling, I think this is the most important topic that we can talk about, because at the end of the day, it's about how are you going to be a great human being in society, not just what education are you getting from an academic standpoint. And I think that we can't forget that.
And Jessica and Robin, I just want to add that there was a question that came up that I think is relevant to this, which is, if I do see an injustice happen, should I film it or try to stop it, or both?
I would say that if you see something, you should speak up. You should speak up without a doubt. And I think a camera is a good tool for accountability. I think that it depends on the situation. I would always encourage people to not put themselves in harm's way. Absolutely. But if there's a way to be able to hold people accountable for their behaviors, I definitely think that could be, that's a strong thing to do. But the most important thing is to speak up and do something, and to report it in some way. So if it's in the workplace, speak up in the workplace. If it's on the street, report it to whether it's law enforcement or some other authority. It does need to be reported. And also, many of you guys know Sean King, who is doing incredible work. Sending him information, I find him to be very responsive. So to people within the community. And so I think that there are many different ways to be able to speak out and to think about accountability.
So just so we're on the same page, Jessica, this isn't one of our planned questions, but I just want to clear the air and make sure everyone's on the same page. What is your working definition for racism? And why is it that a Black person can't be racist?
Why is it a Black person can't be racist?
Yeah, why is it, or do you believe that?
Yeah, well, so racism itself is a social construct. It was something that was started by, so I'm just going to give a little bit of history. Okay, I just want to say that about what it is that I'm saying, and I'm just going to trust that this is a safe space, and that and I'll also just share, and we want to just make sure any comments are appropriate and for everyone who's here in the conversation. We want to continue to hear your questions, so please bring them up. That race is a social construct, and it was something that was created by white individuals after they bought slaves to America. Initially, before that, people were individuals. There wasn't this divide the way that we see it now. But when people started to be seen as chattel property, then that's when racism really started to become a construct. So that when the people say, can a person of color be racist? They may not be a fan of white people, they may not be a fan of certain cultures, but historically that was never how this came about. And so, but I'm not someone who also believes in absolutes. I think that I would say also that racism is when you basically do not support, acknowledge someone from a different ethnic background from you. That also could be, I would say, basically a basic ethnic background from you. What I want to specifically say, though, about the Black experience is that, and why it's a lot of times attributed to Black individuals versus other races. So, for example, if you're of Jewish descent, and we know there's been a lot of history there, is that when it comes to the Black experience in America, when it comes to race, is that there has been no other group that has been a slave on this soil. The other thing is that when it comes to race, people may be able to, if they've come to America or immigrated in some way, been able to change an accent or change something physically about them. When it comes to Black individuals, you cannot change the color of your skin.
Right.
So when you look at someone and you see that they have a different skin tone, what has historically happened is that we've been shut out in America. And that's specifically why and what I think of when it comes to racism. And that's also why I would say it is really this has been built into the structural power of this country. And I think that's why it's hard for people to really, when someone says a Black person is racist, it's really hard to, it's really hard to give voice to that or to support that when this was a social construct built by white people that then built an entire system, an entire country around it.
So, I want to add something. I recently heard a workshop by a particular publisher for a book, but it was Dr. Tiffany Jana. And it's a book called Subtle Acts of Exclusion. She took it on that she was going to rebrand the word microaggression. Done with it. Can't work from the word racism and microaggression, expect people to embrace and try to learn. So she went on this quest. But she recently gave a definition for racism. And one thing that she differentiated for me and clarified for me was the idea of bias and then prejudice and then racism, if they're on a continuum, right? And bias is, I prefer this to that. Prejudice is I'm, going to do one thing over there, but the actual racism is the prejudice plus the power. So, and her explanation was she was a business owner and she can hire and fire people in her business all along, but she only has power in her particular sphere. But as a Black woman, she has none. And so the difference, and one of the subtleties around understanding racism is it's the prejudice plus the power to impact a change for an individual or a group. So when we're talking about this, I just want to offer that up as in addition to what you said about racism. And then moving on to, your recent post, and everyone, if you're on Facebook, need to look up Jessica Robinson and peruse her, scroll through her, what she's been sharing. But there was one share that you had on the 22nd of May, and if you don't mind, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but where were you coming from? There were 4 poignant points that you made about this time, and it was just powerful. Could you share some of that with us?
Yeah, so this is the post really on thinking about, what framing and what cycle are we really in right now? And thinking about this from a spiritual perspective, that what's happening right now is really the ending of a karmic cycle. So what has happened over the past couple of days presently is we have been going through what I would say a rebellion or a revolutionary. It's people acting, wanting to get a specific type of change. I just want to use those words, not riot. So that's why I specifically chose that language. During 99 years ago, so May 31st into June 1st, there was also the Tulsa Massacre. And if you aren't familiar with the Tulsa Massacre, it was basically when it was a part of Tulsa where there was a Black community, which was one of the wealthiest and most affluent in the United States at the time. And there was an altercation that came about in the morning of May 31st. There was one thought that happened that morning in an elevator, was that a Black man somehow assaulted a white woman. There were other people in the elevator as well, from what I understood. So there were all these different reports of what happened. But by the end of that day, in the white community, the rumor was that she was raped. In the Black community, the rumor was he had already been lynched. So in through that night and into the next day, basically white men, and also the law enforcement at the time, deputy sheriffs or the sheriff deputied individuals, and they went about rioting this entire community, this Black community. And by the end of it all, 35 blocks were burned down. 6,000 people were detained. 6,000 Black individuals were detained. At the time, they thought it was maybe 35 people that had died, but now historians are saying that it was up to 300. So basically, this affluent town had completely burned to the ground. And this was done by white men. And so to be going through what we're going through right now, knowing that literally on Sunday and Monday, March 31st and June 1st, 99 years ago, that this happened as well, that there was also another riot and other lootings that was taking place. 99 represents an ending of a cycle. If anyone's familiar with numerology, and if anyone thinks about or is aware of karmic cycles and thinks about it and has an understanding of it, it is an ending. It's a time to begin something new. It's a time to think about the lessons that need to be learned. And so it's for this to be happening right now, I think says a lot. But even more than that, right now, for those of you that are aware of astrology or are passionate about that, there are 4 planets that are in retrograde: Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and Venus. And I won't go into each of those collectively, but basically it is a time for looking at karma and what karma we've created and what karma needs to be healed. It's about looking at our shadows. It's about looking at the past and looking at how we can learn from lessons that needed to already be learned. It's about healing and taking, the word that's coming to me right now is accountability, but it is about learning from the past and not making mistakes, the same mistakes in the future. And then, of course, with Venus, it's love. It's about how are we looking at our values? How are we reevaluating our values? How are we looking at our relationship with others? What's our relationship with love? And so this is not lost on me that all of this is happening. And what this signifies is that this is a time for ancestral healing as well as karmic clearing. I don't know about any of you, but I had a dream of ancestors about 3 weeks ago. And it was a dream of my grandmother. I also, in that same dream, was with my mother. And I was also with a friend. And for me, that represented the past, the present, and the future. And that is not lost on me as we are in this moment now. So if you have had dreams about ancestors, if you have had dreams, I know someone reached out, a friend of mine said, Eileen, you said you had a dream about 99 recently. This is a time for healing. And so if you have done or thought about any ancestral or healing work or karmic clearing work, now is the time to do it. Because this is something that isn't just on the physical plane. It is something that is much larger and spiritual. The other thing that I'll quickly add to this is that in 1919, the summer of 1919, there was something called the Red Summer, where it was a summer of riots. And there were 2 main riots. of white men and Black communities. They were huge. It was nearly a year, from the fall of 2018 through the autumn of 2019, or of 1918 to 1919. And the reason why this is also really important to bring up now is because that was when the Spanish flu was taking place.
Mm-hmm.
That was the pandemic then. So now, fast forward, we are going through a pandemic. We're going through riots. Like we have to learn as human beings. We are repeating cycles because we have not learned. So we're almost repeating past karma in certain ways. And this is a reckoning. And this is also a calling for people to respond to humanity in a much larger way. So the Red Summer was 101 years ago. So the way that I looked at that is that breakdowns as 11, which means awakening. This is an awakening. And I do feel like a lot of people, Lisa, that I'm talking to, have gone through a conscious awakening during this time, which is also part of Saturn being in retrograde. But it also breaks down to 2 ones, which is a start of a new cycle. So as we're ending one cycle, we're starting another cycle. But it also breaks down to 2, which means partnership and harmony and unity. So there's a lot that's going on right now from multiple perspectives. And this is really a calling and a yearning of our souls to respond to what's going on. And also, and many with Mother Earth, that we all need to be better. We all need to do better for our own society, but also more importantly for our future. It would be a shame, wouldn't it, if 100 years from now, this is happening again, because the same structures were in place.
Yeah, we haven't learned.
There hasn't learned.
Jessica and Robin, I wanted to share this question that was placed before. What are the top few places to try to affect change in racial justice? Like, what systems, if changed, would have biggest change? And then how can I be involved best as a white male identifying human and a business owner?
I want to jump in. That is a fabulous question, because it's exactly where my head was going, Jessica, with what you were saying. We had talked just a little bit earlier about how to be a great ally. And you were saying first to acknowledge, there's acknowledgement, and then being open and honest and saying, can we talk? And I don't know all the right answers. And, how are you being impacted? Connecting with the humanity in the other person and being connected in that way. And then the one thing, and I almost said it before and I didn't get through it quite fully, but the fact that Eduardo opened up his space, making a space for us to have this conversation in and of itself is what a good ally does. It offers a platform that the person wouldn't otherwise have to have a conversation. So with that, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about how it would be a great ally?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I do also want to acknowledge Eduardo. I was actually on another chat chain earlier today, and someone posted about wanting to have a talk or a webinar on this. And one of the people responded and made it clear that they felt that Black women needed to be the center of this conversation and needed to be the voices. And so I just want to acknowledge you, Eduardo, thank you for keeping that and honoring that here. And that's not to say that's the case in every situation, but that is the feeling of some people, for sure. So to answer your question of being a business owner and thinking about how to make an impact in power structures here in the United States, there's a lot to be done. And with something that has the power that has been built up over 400 years, there's also this acknowledgement that it won't, that'll take, it could take 100 years more for the power to really be, broken down and for the system that's here, that's been created for there to be true change that really needs to happen. But it starts with local officials, making sure that we're electing people to office that we know are supporting our interests. I would say making sure that we're involved also, and particularly for those of you that have children, that you're involved in the curriculum that your children are studying in school, voicing what's important for them to be learning. I would say, and that's the educational system. I would say being vocal about what's going on in criminal justice systems around the country, that change is happening, whether it's elected officials or it's any type of referendum or anything that the public can vote on. Making sure that you are voicing concerns to them and the leadership. It is important. I think what's been disheartening for me is knowing that the officer that killed George Floyd had 18 complaints against him. So the community clearly spoke out, but that man still continued to go to work every day. So I think that there was a key learning for that department, and it's a key it's a strong learning for a lot of police departments, but it's holding them accountable, which is clearly what's happening now. Don't let anyone off the hook, which is why what's going on right now is so important. Because at the end of the day, if people didn't start organizing, they wouldn't have even arrested him. That is why this is so important. The other thing is, everyone where we are, we have to be the change that we want to see. The truth of the matter is I think institutions, they don't crumble from the outside in, they crumble from the inside out. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have to be responsible for where we are. How can we also dismantle systems that are in place where we are? So it's really important also. So a lot of that is government, but that's why it's important to elect the right officials. So I would say there's so many different areas. It's in so many different areas of every single area of our society.
But as a business owner, Jessica, just and I would assume there's quite a few people here on the call who may own their own business. As a business owner, what can you do in that regard? How do you stand up in your community? How can you engage as a business owner? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say a couple of things. First, as a business owner, be of a community of like-minded people. I think that that's important. I think it's being clear on what behaviors you're willing to accept and willing to not accept, depending on what type of business you have. Whether it's if you have storefronts, if you have some sort of retail space, what type of behaviors will you accept and will you won't? Not just from your employees, but from the people that are in that space. Mm-hmm. I think that that's also important. Let's say you don't have a retail client, you have a consulting business. What type of clients are you willing to work with? And I think, and it's being very strong and giving voice to that, which can be scary to people. But I think it's making it clear that you are setting clear boundaries around who you're willing to work with and who you're not. Okay, so it's kind of like, I think something that may be somewhat popular around this is people have the no asshole rule, right? Some of you may have heard of that. Well, how about the no racist rule, right? And you're like, bottom line. So we all kind of, know that, but there are people that that can be subtle and that can be, that may not be overt, but part of that is you calling that out. Right? You calling that out and making sure that we're setting boundaries around that. I would say, if let's say you have a business where you have suppliers, I would also say support Black-owned businesses. Support Black-owned businesses that can be your suppliers. Support businesses if you have to spend money someplace. Support Black-owned businesses. And I just want to say I think that's so important now more than ever, because what we also know is through the PPP program is that we were disproportionately not represented. And so I do think it's important that that we are supporting Black businesses wherever we can right now. I would also.
That's such a great point. I just want to interject and just, the fact of the matter is, in 2045, the diversity across our country will be through and through. The minority will be the majority, and that's just a fact. And so the degree that we don't have a supply chain that's inclusive of all people representing all kinds of ideas, women, differently abled, we cut ourselves off as being an economic powerhouse. So just think about just what you just shared, Jessica. And now we've just seen where these businesses that are brick and mortar front, on Main Street are being looted and they may not have the proper insurance. So employing these people, engaging them, making sure you're doing business with people who care about that very thing. It's like putting your values, living your values, putting that first in your business and living and walking the walk and talking the talk. So
yeah, I'm so right on, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because this is the reality. Okay, if you haven't, it's been a busy year for everyone. If you haven't completed the census, please complete the census, because the truth of the matter is, by 2045, this will be a majority minority country. Many people we don't like what happens in America, but a lot of people would prefer to live here than other countries. And the truth of the matter is that the state of the economics within the Black community, if that continues the way that it is, our GDP could go down in the future. There are national implications to what could be happening by not really ensuring that there is a strong pipeline of individuals that are going to be the majority in the future. There also the power structures can continue to divide, and we're seeing part of that now. As much as we all want to bring that together, it's possible that there could be increased division. And so we don't want to see the more economics and power continue to be in a smaller part of the population.
right.
It's important. Also, when your GDP goes down, it becomes a national security issue. When we don't have the right education for our students, when they are not receiving the proper education, and they're not able to fully give their full self to our economic community and our economic system in the United States, it becomes a national security issue. And so I just would also want to just broaden how we look at this, because it is so incredibly important. And it's important if you look at it where you would want to continue to see the United States be a leader in the world. Maybe we want to have another leader in the world. But the truth of the matter is, that is where the United States is now. And I think that what is clear is that just even over this administration, the world doesn't see the United States as a leader. And until we can get ourselves together by ensuring we have a strong pipeline of talent that represent all backgrounds, if we have to make sure that we have a strong economic community that represents all backgrounds, we have to make sure that we have people in government that represent a wide variety of views and not just one part of the power structure. Because the way we're going now, we will not, the United States as a whole will not be in the position that, as a leader of the world, the way that it is now. It just will not happen with the new leader in the White House.
So Jessica, we're coming up on the hour, and I really, really want to hear, I'm going to ask this question. I think when it comes down to it, we all have a choice as individuals, right? We can choose hope or despair. We can choose courage or fear. I'm feeling some hope based on what you're saying. I'm feeling some hope because my 8th grader this year, her history class was slavery to Nixon and everything in between, like, right. And in an independent school in the Northeast, they are teaching, and she's read A Raisin in the Sun and To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, as an 8th grader, I'm saying there's some hope, and we can feed hope or we can feed the despair. How would you suggest we feed the hope?
I would say we have to be present to what's going on. By that, I mean, have conversations. Don't be afraid of the tough conversations. We have to continue to educate and learn. There's so much to know. And because so many people did not receive a good education on American history that includes Black history, there's a lot that people have to learn about this country. So continue to do that. I do feel like right now there is a calling. There is a calling for humanity to step up and be the change and be the love. So be that person, no matter what, be that person in your community. Be that person that is willing to be able to be the person who's mediating tough conversations, that's willing to have the tough conversation, that's willing to step up if you see something that's not going right, particularly in the workplace as well. We didn't talk a lot about the dynamics of people of color in the workplace, but I actually read a statistic today that 36% of Black individuals don't feel that they can bring their full self to work because they don't feel it's safe to do so. And so creating these spaces is incredibly important, and we all have the opportunity to do that. And I would also just say, keep in mind that, you know, we all have a mission here. We all have things that we want to achieve. We're all maybe passionate, of course, about different things. But the one thing that we all really do have in common that has to be kind of a foundation for everything that we do is love. And I don't know what your spiritual background is, but if you were only asked one question after you died or before you died, and that was, how did you love while you were here? I think, what would be the answer to that question? Now is a reckoning. Now is the time. Now is the time to do that ancestral healing, that karmic healing, find out more information about your family. Were they slaves? Were they slave owners?
Or they could have been both.
Riots?
They could have been both, right?
Yeah, yeah. Were they part of these riots? Find out about your family history. That's really important too. Yes.
First of all, acknowledge Jessica and Robin. We have this gesture in Fearless Communicators, which is this, which is called elevated sparkleation. So we're going to elevated sparklate the two of you for this.
Yeah, for real. I do mine like this.
Yes.
We did not get, unfortunately, to everybody's questions. So all of the resources that Jessica has compiled, and I think that they're over 60. There are a lot of them. We will be sharing with you via email, so stay tuned for that. We had initially planned to do this next week, but so it was going to be all pretty. We don't have time to make it pretty. It's just going to be what it's going to be. You're going to get it. It's going to be a lot of resources. We'll make it pretty eventually and resend it to you. But I think the most important thing is if you have the tools in your hands.
I just had two more things to say.
Please, yes, please, jump.
Okay. So before we close, there are just two other things that I really wanted to call out that we cannot forget and we have to raise up. One, Black trans individuals have a life expectancy of the age 35 because they are killed or suicide, mental health. That, it breaks my heart every time I see that that statistic has not changed. We have to be that change. 35. The global life expectancy for women is 74 and for men it's 71. Black trans individuals in the United States, it's 35. So with that, I just want to say that the safety and security of one community is bound to the safety and security of other communities.
Absolutely.
And so we have to support each other. This is a life and death issue. So thank you. So just wanted to say that.
Drop the mic.
Yes. Jessica shifted her schedule. She has a meeting at 6. So she really moved things around so she could be present for this conversation. I want to thank you for everything that you did to make that happen, Jessica. Yes, I love you. I love you, Robin. We have been responsive, and the next 2 Fearless Chats will be, at least the next 2 Fearless Chats will be around this topic. Since this is emerging, we don't know what those are, right? We're really in the inquiry and we're really in the listening. So we will send you, we'll probably be choosing that within the next 24 hours. We'll let you know what that is. The other thing that I want to let you know is something that we have chosen to do. It's something historically that I was not aware of until I was 40 years old, which is Juneteenth, which is June 19th, which is a day of celebration of the emancipation of slaves. We as a community will be celebrating Black women's stories on that day, the day before. So it'll be Juneteenth Eve. So stay tuned for that. As just, again, our commitment to elevating the stories of diverse voices, and then in this specific context, Black women's stories. So stay tuned for that. And bye, Jessica, go to your thing.
Bye, thank you.
For those of you who are able to stay on, there's a little minor ritual that we do to complete our sessions. I know that we are at the end of time, which is 6 o'clock. So if you do have to go, we acknowledge that it's okay for you to depart. This ritual will be very interesting because this is the first time we've done it with so many people. And I think considering what is going on in this moment, I think may be really powerful. So if you are able to be off, if you're able to be on video so we can see your face in this moment, that could be really useful. And it's a very simple exercise where, and we will be here as long as we can to complete it, and then we will move on. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna model it, and then we're gonna move from person to person. And as much as possible, let's just keep track of the people who were there. And if we have more than one person on a screen, if we can just acknowledge them collectively, that would be very useful. Nita Baum, I see you and I thank you.
Robin Dillard, I see you and I thank you in all of your brightness.
Thank you. Gordon Johnson, I see you and I thank you. We need to unmute.
You're on mute, Gordon.
My apologies. Jacqueline Ramono, I see you and I thank you.
Newton Campbell, I see you and I thank you.
Leslie Odo, I see you and I thank you.
Erin Hillard, I see you and I thank you.
Jen Barkman, we see you and we thank you.
Alison Davis, I see you and I thank you.
Charismatic, I see you and I thank you.
Lorena Gonzalez, and whoever's sitting next to you, I see you and I thank both of you.
Deborah Driscoll, we see you and we thank you.
I think we're having some technical difficulties with Deborah Driscoll.
Allie, I see you and I thank you.
Is that me? Eduardo, I see you and I thank you so much.
Cappy, I see you and I thank you.
Stephanie, I see you. Stephanie Who, I see you and I thank you.
Allison Davis, I see you and I thank you.
Joanna Lovering, I see you and I thank you.
Joe Attack, I see you and I thank you.
If you have not gone yet, if you can raise your hand on the thing, because we may end up in cycles all over again.
Jennifer.
Monet Crunton, I see you and I thank you.
Jennifer, I see you and I thank you.
Sorry, was that for me?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
Jennifer, I just couldn't pronounce your last name perfectly, so I got shy. So I see you and I thank
okay.
you.
Thank you. Jennifer Thayer, I see you and I thank you.
I'm flipping over to the next screen to find somebody with their hand up. Keep raising those hands, guys. There's Ashley. Hi, Ashley. I see you and I thank you.
Linda Fern, I see you and I thank you.
Erin Hillard, I see both of you and I thank you.
Keep those hands raised if you have not gone yet. I see you, Corey Purdom and Cappy and Aida.
Aida.
And Bridget.
Ada Murphy, we see you and we thank you.
Hi, Cappy. I see you and I thank you.
Thank you. Bridget, I see you and I thank you.
I don't see any more hands.
There's one
Does
left.
anyone?
One left.
Yeah.
Corey Purdom, I see you and I thank you.
And Corey, you get to thank us all, see us all, and thank us all.
Thank you all. Thank you for the conversation. It was good to be here. I love you.
Mwah. Thank you all so much. Was everybody seen and heard and acknowledged? Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here. Please stay tuned to your emails about our upcoming programs. Thank you so much for being here. Always remember to fear less, speak free, and love more. Thank you so much. Robin, stay on.
Okay. That was cool.